Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of the Roaring Agents podcast. I'm Mike Rohrig, and today I'm very happy to be here with Mike Simonsen. He is the CEO, founder of Altos Research, which is a real estate data and analytics firm. He's a true self-proclaimed data geek. He founded Altos Research to commercialize modeling software he built for his personal need to track the value of oversized Silicon Valley mortgage after the NASDAQ bubble burst of 2002. He has since grown the company to be the nation's premier vendor of real-time housing and rental market analytics. I use it. Clients include the largest investment firms, banks, and thousands of real estate agents across the country. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Your story is kind of similar to I think probably more than half the agents out there. Something in the market they didn't like, and they went to go figure out the solution. They wanted to be better at it. So I'd love to hear the story about how you got into doing this.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a data software guy. When I moved to Silicon Valley in the 90s, two bubbles ago, I like to say, I was doing like networking software, and there's a billion packets on the network, and which are the bad ones, and it's a data problem, and it's a data visualization problem. I always loved the being in the data business because it's a really fascinating model where you're getting information to people, and so that information is always changing, and so you're always getting something new to your customers and to consumers like all the time, as opposed to like shipping a version of software and then it's stable, right? And then you ship another version. So I've always been interested in the data, and it took me a while to figure out what the data company was going to be. But what happened was I was here working at a startup in Silicon Valley and newly married, and we bought a house. And buying a house even 20 years ago, buying a house in Silicon Valley is nuts, right? It's this tiny little piece of junk. It's you got this massive mortgage at 30 years old, like it's insane. And it was insane even then. But we did it. We bought the littlest, oldest, piece of shit on the neighborhood and in the nice neighborhood that we could do, which was great. Except that then at that time, the NASDAQ stock market bubble was insane. It burst. And so the real estate market had been fueled in Silicon Valley by, all these $2-3 million stock option purchase homes. And so the market just fell by a third in 2002, 2003. What was interesting though is if you were in the market at that time, but you could still get $1 million mortgage. It was pre-subprime and stuff without even blinking. So what happened in Silicon Valley was the real expensive stuff came down, but the low end of the expensive neighborhood where I had bought didn't go anywhere at all. It didn't go anywhere at all because it was still really easy to get, you buy the $1 million range instead of the $3 million range. And so the threes evaporated. But the ones was like they were giving out $1 million mortgages without even blinking. And so it was really fascinating. And I knew this because I had just been building a little database of, properties and looking at pricing and building my own data models. So I did that for several years just for kicks. As we went into 2003, 2004, there were other things where, the signals were you look at the time, it was you look at the newspaper, and the newspaper published their quarterly, report, and this zip code's up and this one's down, and they had my zip code. I remember looking at the San Jose Mercury News, my zip code, and it had an NA. And there were no transactions in the whatever window they looked at, and they we don't know what's going on. But I knew there were 60 homes on the market or 45 or whatever it was. I could tell you exactly what's going on in the market. right now. And so there was all these signals where I realized that my little models that I was building had better information than anybody else. Realtors who are in the space and knew it in their bones had it, but it's really hard for realtors to communicate that. A few real special ones can communicate it, and the real pros can, but for most of us, it's like hard to communicate data, and it's hard to be credible. And
Right.
so it was at that point when I decided to, talking with my co-founder, we said, let's commercialize this and build it out for the country and do everything we can. So that's the story. It's been 15 years now.
Wow. So when you say you built a model, how did you get that information? How do you get this information and aggregate it? And
Well, it's funny because at the time there was also this other transition available happening, which was, in the 90s, in order to figure out what's for sale, you have to talk to the agent, and the agent has the printout from the MLS, and, you had to carry the book around. But all of a sudden now everything's on the internet, listings and all the, all these things. And so I was just starting to watch. And so then over time we have a database of every property in the country, and we built it all out in a real robust way. But that way we can watch every single home every week and go, here's the changes in pricing from last week, and here's and so that's what the database ended up telling me. We did a few other things like, because I had bought at the bottom of my market, the cheapest range in my market, and the top of my market is what had cratered. What the observation is, the high end of the market may be behaving very differently from the low end.
yes.
In any market. And so what we do now is we take every single zip code in the country, and also every county and state, and we at every level we do it, but we do it into price range segments, 4 quartiles. The top of the market, top 25%, middle 2, and then the bottom 25%. And so, so one of the things we do in the model is we always have the top of the market so that you can tell, yes, you're talking to a client, and yes, the house down the street took 180 days to sell, but in your price range, if you want to make this offer, you got to make this offer now because it's 18 days, and we could see exactly where the data is. And so that's how the model came from a very personal place and into a place that is usable for a lot of people.
So I get your report through my title company, and I love it. I love it because I can become a expert in any market, any zip code really fast. And, they have that quote that you probably heard, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And, real estate is local. And what I love what you just said about having those quartiles is that if you look at the overall market, just like real estate's local, it's also, price based. And when you have the swings of the upper market, the swings that luxury can have, it really confounds what you see.
Yep.
And so being able to break it up and saying, well, hey, look at that entry level price. Oh, that's not only stable, it's probably going up when the luxury is dropping, because that's where people come in. And so to break that up, I love these charts you've got on here, and I'll probably share on when I post this on social media, but you have a dial that shows where we are in a seller's market, which I think is really important for agents who are going out on a listing appointment. I love that you break out houses and condos because those markets are so different. The way you've broken this up is fantastic. And then you have the graph where you do the quartiles. Now, a question I have, I am just blown away by the relisted number. The relisted and price decreased numbers.
Yes.
So to have in this market, so I'm looking at Portland, Oregon, the whole city.
Yep.
And Portland, Oregon has 37% price drops. Now, in this market, that's insane. It was 41% on November 13th.
So so price drops is a really interesting one. Here's the way to think about it. As a rule of thumb around the country, about 35% of homes are overpriced when they list. Sometimes that's strategic, right? Sometimes you're like, if we don't take at least one cut, then we underpriced it. Sometimes it's accidental or it's like a crazy sell, but about 35% is normal. That mid 30s range, 30 to call it 30 to 38% is normal. So then what happens is in a really hot market, 35% think they're overpriced, but now there's like multiple offers, and some people were trying to overprice. There are multiple offers and whatever, and they got the price they listed at, so they didn't have to take a price cut. So now the percentage drops 35, 30, and it's also very geographically specific. So like California, because we have a chronic shortage of homes for sale, it's in the hotter markets of California, it'd be like 25, 20, 18. Like in Palo Alto, it might be 12% take a price cut, even though 30 or 5% think they are overpriced. So like those dynamics happen. So in Portland right now, being in this space of 30, upper 30s, 40s, pretty normal for Portland. There's decent inventory, for example, compared to California for the population size, right? There's more homes for sale for the population size. And so therefore what you want to do in Portland is like, okay, we know the market's hot now. What do we want to know? What do we want to watch to know? Is it cooling? I hear it's cooling. It kind of feels like it's cooling. And what you'll like at some point, it's going to hit that transition. And then what you'll see is that price reductions number go from the mid 30s to the mid 40s. And that's because now people, they listed and all of a sudden demand is weaker than we expected. Now we start feeling that and we say, oh, we got to cut our price to get ahead of it. So now all of a sudden more than that number. So the key on that is when I look at the national number, I think 35%. If it's below 35%, that's a hot market. If it's above 30, really above 40, 45 at national level, now you can start seeing it cool. In Portland, you want to look at the normal range in there, which it's going to be upper 30s or so. And so over time, like if you watch it and you're like, wow, this is now climbing up to the 40s, now that's going to be a signal. Now you're a listing agent, you're like, okay, I can show to my client who wants to, who thinks they want to overprice this. I can say, yes, but there are 47% that have taken price cuts right now, almost half the stock. Why don't you listen to me and let's price it where we need to price it. And so you can use that for communication, right in the listing appointment. So that's how you look at that number. 37 isn't bad, even though it seems like a tie.
Well, and you made that point about being geographic. So while we were talking, I decided to pull up a couple other cities around here to see what they were. And so Portland was, what did I say, 39?
37, I think, yeah.
So Beaverton, which is directly west, a suburb of Portland, they're at 24%. Mm-hmm. And then we have a suburb, Wilsonville, which our team does a lot of business in, 13.
Yes. Okay. So that's really interesting, right? You know exactly where the demand is in the metro market right now, right? That makes a big difference when you're on a listing appointment in Portland, in city proper, versus the suburbia, right? Like that's exactly what we want to learn from there. That's really interesting.
So do you have any, in your models and the data you look at, do you have any proof that overpricing will garner you a less price in the end than pricing it correctly?
We don't do that kind of analysis. Really, I like to let, we do the data of here's what's going on in the market. And you as the agent get to shine as the expert, right? So rather than the ultimate end price or like how you price a given property, you can show, for example, sometimes it's very interesting to say, if we price it a little more, we're bumping up into the next quartile above us, and all of a sudden it's 120 days instead of 70. right? We can show that kind of thing in, and so that can be a really, compelling part of the plan.
So our team is, because it's hard to talk about being credible with the data you give, and I think that's what's nice about using your company instead of going, well, here's the numbers I've looked at, and they're like, well, you're a real estate agent, I'm not going to trust you.
Right.
But when we come and say, look, if you overprice this, you're all the things that we've seen said that you're going to get less. The example I have is our team recently took a listing where someone was trying to get that, because we're getting a lot of multiple offers up here, and so they went up here. I'm going to say the price because they give away one of our listings if anyone knows well enough. But so we priced it lower, to get that attention that we thought it did. We only sold it for $10,000 less than what it was listed for. And it had been listed for 3 months, and we sold it in a weekend. So that exact case where you want to get the attention, because it's social proof. Social proof is a very important thing. Well, they're writing an offer. Well, it must be worth it. Now I'll do it. Yeah. So that's a whole nother thing.
That's really interesting. Yeah, there's so much power in that. I love that, taking the market report into the listing presentation, right? Put it on top of the listing presentation. And there's a couple of, key techniques when you do that. You mentioned the market action index. That's the buyers and sellers market. And so, you walk into the listing presentation, you put the market report on there, and you say, look, while we have your house listed, I'm going to put this in your inbox every Monday morning. And what I want you to do is look at one number. I want you to look at this market action index. See how it's in the seller's market now. But if this starts falling while we have your house listed, that's the market giving us a signal. And especially if it falls into buyer's territory while we have your house signal, that means that we might need to get ahead of this, and that's the market giving us a signal. And so then you have it, and in those times when we go, transition from hot to cooler, now you get the client who picks up the phone and goes, Mike, I've been watching this number, like maybe we need to do a price cut to get ahead of this thing, right? And they initiate that part of the conversation. And so that's a super powerful way. So what's fascinating is, as an agent, you don't even have to know what the data means. You just say, you look at this number.
Yeah.
And then they go, wow, Mike has everything I need, right? So it's really a great way to do it.
Well, a lot of agents are trained to never say, this is what I think the value of your home is. Instead, what we should say is, this is what the market is saying.
Yeah.
Because if you come in and say, I think your house is worth $500,000, and then you're like, well, it's not selling. Well, then I'm wrong. If you say the market is saying, now the market is saying something else. Mm-hmm. And, there's so many things that are so well thought out about about this page, where you to show the graph over time. How far back does this go? It looks like about 2 months, maybe. So August 28th to
the little spark line.
Yeah.
The little spark line is 3 months, and the big chart is multiple years.
Yeah. So to see that, and on the sellers in the market action index, you see what today is, and you see what last month was, because for you to remember is not likely. So you can see last month. This is fantastic, and we have used it on a listing appointment where the seller just would not change their price, even though we weren't getting showings, and we use this. So
terrific.
It's a great product. What other products do you have for agents to help them? Look, most agents are not data geeks like you and me.
Yeah.
Most are people, and they get bored by this. So what other products do you have to help those agents?
So the data is the core of what we do, but really what it is data is how we stay connected to our clients. It is how you have a database of people, your contacts, your buyers and sellers over time. You've got your database, and you've got to reach them. What's fascinating is, I like to say there's only 3 questions in real estate: what's for sale, how much is my house worth, and how's the market? So what's for sale, you're sending listing alerts, and you've got your IDX search on your website, and everybody has those. And it's that's a real question. How much is my house? We've got, the home value lead gen stuff. You've got Zillow, like that's a real question. How much is my house worth? And how's the market, though, is everything else. Is now a good time? Do I have to make an offer quickly? Is it going up or down? Like, these are all how's the market questions. And so what Altos does is focuses on how's the market. So when you're communicating with your clients, you may have listing alerts, or you get a lead conversion. You get a lead conversion on a valuation, question. How much is my house worth? And then what do? All right, you told me my house was worth $575,000. Now what? Now next week, you tell me that again? But so what we do is next week, though, the data is always fresh. So really what we do with agents is we put that market data in your client's hands. So we do the email marketing for you, and the social media, and the content on your website, and all of those things. That's what you get when you subscribe to Altos Research. You want to click, and I need to put some stuff on Facebook today, and you click, and like, here's the market, click through to my market report. We actually do lead gen in the report itself. So if somebody clicks through from your Facebook and then they search for their neighborhood, they convert in the report, so that now you have a new lead who's been looking at your Altos report, that you then can, put stuff in the top of your lead funnel. So it's really about reaching clients. It's more than just it's way before the listing presentation, right? It's like, how do I nurture these people over time? It's funny, listing alerts, everybody's got the listing alerts. You send the listing alert email, this property and your price. But one of the fascinating things right now is there's no listings. What do you do? Like, how do there's no listings, there's no listing alerts, right? So, but there is market data every week. And so, like, getting out of relying on that one, drip, to shifting into more thoughtful, bigger picture, things that work for anybody, buyers or sellers, and so that's what we do for folks. So you get yours from your title rep,
right?
But as an agent, you can brand it for yourself and put it in your customers' hands automatically.
Okay. In case someone is listening to this and in front of a desktop or laptop, what's the best place to go to learn about your products?
So altosresearch.com and ALTOS, Altos Research. And then, you can run a report for your local market. You can go, do some of the get a full demo. You can, we have a new ebook that like dives into all the like, how do you talk about the data, and how do you use it in your business, and how do you use it in listing present, all those things in that ebook, so they can download the ebook there, and learn more that way. So altosresearch.com.
Where'd the name come from?
It was a creative leap in branding. I live in a town called Los Altos, or I lived at the time in a town called Los Altos. And it was a placeholder name 15 years ago, and it's still the name.
I love that. What numbers are not worth tracking? Because you had to decide which numbers to look at and which ones weren't important, which ones maybe agents are looking at and being misled.
So here's an interesting one. You know which one that I think is not worth looking at?
Days on market?
Sold price.
Huh.
How much did these houses, what is the sold price, and what was the town,
Portland.
And I know, but you said you work in
Wilsonville.
Media and home price sold in Wilsonville last month is lagging, right? It's last month. It doesn't show, like, there's so much signal in the active market right now, so that, looking at like these 8 homes sold, but there's 40 on the market. And of those 40, these 8 took a price cut. And like, there's so much signal right now that, and what happens is when you look at the active market, this is what you see if you walk into the market today. Like, if I go and start shopping, or if I go to list my house, this is my competition. Mm-hmm. But if I look at what sold last month, like that's a month ago, and it's usually this wacky little subset, and not nearly as powerful in the communication of answering how's the market. So we focus on the active, the asking prices and the changes in those as really what the end consumer really wants to know. Isn't that interesting?
I started to argue with you, but then I realized that's what I do. When I talk to people listing, I say, look, here's what's sold, and this is what an appraiser, and this is what buyers are going to kind of pay attention to a point.
Mhm.
But your competition matters more. If you're the only one that's at the like this, or someone else is priced. And so as I started to argue with you, I argue with myself, and you're right.
Well, it's like any given property is over or underpriced, right?
Right.
And so it is interesting to know where the one that looks just like yours, where that closed last month. Like that's good value, but and it's a data point, right? But in the traditional sense in real estate data, like that's the only data point.
Right. Well, you don't know the
And
motivation of that buyer.
that's right.
I had a listing. It was right when the market was tanking. And I called my sellers and I said, look, you need to drop this price. And they're like, we have 2 years of savings. We can hold on to this house for 2 years. And I'm like, you're probably going to. And then one day this person called me and said, hey, can I see this house on 146? I was like, sure. Do you have an agent? They said, yeah. I said, it'll be there. Just go call your agent. And it was way out from me. So I wasn't in a hurry. So they went and saw it. They wrote an offer for 20 grand under. I told the agents, like, look, I've talked to those sellers. They're not going to go more than $5,000 down. We just had an offer like this. And she was mad. And I said, look, no games, no nothing. They have the money and they're going to sit on it. But that guy loved that house so much. He bought it for 5,000 off, and that's it. That house was easily worth $20,000 off. So when that home sold, it changed the signal, like you said.
Yeah.
And all those neighbors must have loved it because the market was doing this, but he helped prop it up for a week.
Yep.
And this is where, and this was hilarious as I was getting ready to argue, but I have all these reasons. You're exactly right. And sold only matters a little bit. It's
a little bit.
Past performance is not indicative of future results, like they always say, right?
Exactly. Right. And so that's why we do the Altos data every week. Right. So you walk in and it's like, look, these 8 sold last month. Interesting, right? There's signal there, but there's 40 on the market right now. They're at this price range here. These 2 are new. They came in a little bit higher than there is so much signal in the active market.
Right.
And that's what we focus on at Altos.
I've been tracking since the pandemic hit. What I started tracking, I wanted to see what happened is the new listings and the new pendings. I wanted to see how that was happening. And I saw that basically April 10th, things turned around. And I was just watching it every morning. And I realized, at first I just watched pendings. And then it got messy because it was doing this, because we have a cycle where pendings throughout a week, they're more on Mondays and Sundays. So I did a 7-day number.
Yep.
And that helped a lot to smooth things out. And we have the lowest inventory we've ever had in Portland. We're at 1 month. We've never had that in the history of RMLS, but I've been watching it and the pendings have been here and the new listings are here. And I know not all those pendings hold together, but to watch that and just go, I was like, no, it's going to be down this month. To see it every day, it's fun.
Yeah.
This is,
that's one of the other data points that I like to say don't use, which is the sold count. So traditionally, you'll see the headlines that interpret demand based on number of sold, right? You say like, oh, it's really hot because, X thousands of houses sold. Or, fewer sold, so the demand isn't as high. But in a supply constrained market, you can't measure the demand by the transaction volume, because if there were more houses, there'd be more transactions. So we like to measure, we have demand. So we talked about price reductions already. There's days on market, and we have all these other proxies for demand that we can use to understand demand. That's really really fascinating, where like transaction volume, it can't tell you. It tells you how many sold like then, but it doesn't actually tell you demand.
I realized I didn't mention this. Price increased
Yes.
5%. Are is this a where they put it in the RMLS or the local MLS and they said, hey, we're moving up here? Or are you seeing a different data point like the closing? Or where is?
So that is a change in pricing for a given property in like the last 90-day window. So that 5% maybe there's a few things that come into, maybe it's a flip, right? So there's an investor flip that comes in there. Sometimes it's a strategic move where you like list didn't sell for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Now you get the listing. You're like, you know what? We're going to price it up here because it's getting more searches and we're getting like, and so actually it's a, an increase in that way. And then all of a sudden it sells at the higher price. Sometimes it's the iBuyers. So, you
Yeah,
might
they do a
see,
lot of that.
you do a lot of that, right? So, and so about 5%. And then what's interesting is in, some of the more expensive California markets or whatever, it'll be 1%. And in places like Dallas or Atlanta, where it's like all this iBuyer activity and a lot of investor activity, it's more like 10% have price increases. So it's really fascinating. So that's also a really interesting guide for demand. So if you're looking at a market and you've been watching this and that number is at 5% in Portland and it starts ratcheting down, that's because the sellers know demand is weakening. We don't have the room to lift the price on this. We're going to hold on, whatever the mix is. And so that's a really great gauge.
Hmm.
It's change over time.
Right. Huh. I could talk about numbers all day. I like I said, I have my own chart, and then about every 2 weeks, I have a bonus episode of a podcast called Myconomics, where I just talk about the news and numbers I like.
I love it.
But I want to talk about your company, and you have a video that I loved where you were talking about you hit a time where you needed some reflection, and you turn around and 10x your company's profit. And let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
So
Yes,
what happened and how'd you do that?
it's a process I call hacking happiness, and I'm in the middle of writing a book on the topic. I've got about 60,000 words written and a lot of editing to do. So the basic premise is this. So I went through a challenging time. I've had this company for 15 years. And when you're an entrepreneur, like you go through these phases of being excited about what you're doing and sometimes not excited about what you're doing. And, in real estate, I've actually sometimes will do a version of this talk on stage, at a conference and I ask, like, do you know anybody in real estate who may be really successful, but kind of miserable? Right. And like everybody goes, yeah, I know that person, right? Like they make a lot of money, but they're kind of miserable the whole time. So you get in this place and things are not right. I was in a personally really bad place, not like really bad. And then not paying attention to the company. And we spent a few years of it took a year to rewrite all of our software. And 3 years later, we were finally finished. And, like all of these things were together and not feeling good. And we got in a bind, and I personally got in a bind, and I had to fix myself. We talk a lot about, in this industry, a lot about, sales plans and, you got to make X calls and you got to do X touches and you do these things and therefore, and the results are going to follow. But I was in a place where like I didn't care enough to do it. Right. And so what I had to fix was not to do, I had to fix my care enough. My ability to really care. And what I did was an internal journey where I realized that we can be purposeful with our internal biochemistry, neurotransmitters, in particular serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and cortisol, where we can put them in the right place. And then the result is that these hormones are the biology of our emotions. So Serotonin is the anchor of our happiness. When we're feeling happy, our serotonin is up. When our serotonin is up, we are feeling happy. Oxytocin is about love and bonding. And so when you like say, I love you, Mike, like I am feeling oxytocin and I'm communicating that love. Cortisol is the stress one. Dopamine's the performance one. So all of our sales goals and things are about dopamine. But dopamine is hollow. And it's why it crashes. It's why we can achieve but kind of feel miserable, because we're feeling miserable. We don't have the serotonin. We have the dopamine, but not the serotonin. We go, and so what I realized is I had to work on my serotonin. And we can do that through mindset. We can do that through activities. We can do that through nutrition. And so this was that talk, the Hacking Happiness talk is my journey for doing that, for changing those things. And then why once we put, I call it a superpower, we put these hormones in the right mix and all kinds of magic happens. Like all kinds of good things happen, and like feels come in and it feels like it's random, but it turns out it's not random. It's because we are in an attractive mode, and it, all of a sudden the deal comes, and all of a sudden, well, there's more money in my pocket. And like all of these things happen just by putting ourselves in the right place. And so putting ourselves in the right place that's the exercise, the mindset, the specific daily activities, and the nutrition.
So how do you feel that that alone 10x your results?
So
not something else, not something outside. What led you to believe that it was all that?
So I was very intentional with my work. So for example, we can increase our serotonin with a mindset concept I call no coming and going. There's no difference between inbound and outbound happiness, or inbound love and outbound love. There's only the oxytocin in our body. So when I am being loved, my oxytocin goes up. When I am giving love, my oxytocin goes up. And now when my oxytocin and my serotonin are up, now I feel purposeful and I feel confident. So what happens is this, like I didn't set out to fix my profit. I set out only to fix my happiness. And profit was one of the things that worked well, was that resulted. And I have a few models that I use for it, but you can think about it, this example this way. I was in the heart of my crisis, and I get a voicemail from a broker client who's been a client for 8 years or 10 years or something like that. And the voicemail says, Mike, call me. And I was, oh man, I can't do it. Like I can't take another, like I cancel. I can't return that call. Right. And I avoid him and voicemails and emails, and I can't do it. And because I'm in a cortisol space, and cortisol is the stress hormone. It's anger and fear. It's fight or flight. It's, all these tension things. And then, I'd started a meditation practice, and part of my work is a meditation practice, because the meditation drops the cortisol, it increases the serotonin and the oxytocin, depending on the type of meditation you're doing. And so it literally shifts your biochemistry. It shifts the makeup of your brain, like the size and shape of your brain, and it shifts the literal biochemistry when you build the practice, like physical workout. Like you work out for 3 months and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm stronger. Same thing with a meditation workout. So I do a morning meditation. My cortisol's low. My serotonin is a little higher. I say, I'm going to call him back today. I pick up the phone. I call him back. He goes, Mike, how do I add 100 agents to my account? He wanted to triple his business with me. And it only happened because I was able to be in a space to I can call him back. And so it turns out those types of things I've avoided them for weeks. And I avoid them for weeks because I'm in stress mode. I'm in fear. I'm in fight or flight mode. It's either I got to fight it or I got to run away. And so, the purposeful actions drop the cortisol, they increase the serotonin. Now I can make those phone calls. They also, if you think about this, think about the difference when you're in confidence space with a customer call, like a tough customer call, and you're like the price reductions, you go, we need to reduce the price in your house. Here's A, B, and C. And they go, okay, Mike, you're the expert. I'm going to listen to you. Now the house sells and everybody gets paid. The difference is you go in and you're like, yeah, well, I kind of think that we need to, do baby? And they go, you know what, Mike, you don't know what you're talking about. We're not going to drop my price. Right. And so now it's like, it's even just micro levels of confidence on that phone call. They're more likely to do business with you. They're more likely to trust you. All of these elements happen. And they happen, they literally, you can measure, for example, your creative decision-making process, speed and expansiveness is correlated with higher oxytocin. So the more oxytocin you have, the more expansive, the more options you see. When you're in cortisol mode, it's fight or flight, right? It's run away from the lion. You're narrow.
That makes sense. You'd have to be narrow to know the path away to get
just run fast, man. Right? Like that's all you got. And so the people around you feel that instantly, right? They know you're in expansive mode, and they're like, I want to work with Mike.
Right.
And so as a result, your family's better. You're actually healthier, like physically healthier, because cortisol actually slows the digestion. It stores body fat. It like shuts everything else off to fight the thing. And so we actually get sick more often when we're high in cortisol. So now you get your cortisol low and your serotonin, your oxytocin high, you're feeling purposeful about your work. You feel proud about your work. Like you're much more happy to make that one more phone call. When you make that call, you sound smarter and cooler, and you're more likely. And all of these things cascade into things like profit, right? You get more deals done. You get more in the bank. You get more people like, I want to work with you, Mike. I want to work on your team. And all of those things happen. And so I have a bunch of examples that I use, but that's like that's like how we can literally spend time on our internal biology. And all of a sudden, like magic happens in our world.
Let me give you this concept to you, and tell me your opinion on whether it's dopamine or serotonin. So, came across this study about mice and rats, and what they did is they taught them to go through a tube to get food, and then what they did eventually is said, okay, they put one on either end of the tube, and they didn't fight; they just pushed each other. So it wasn't like blood sport or anything. But what they found was the rat that won would continue to win. The rat that lost would continue to lose. And if they took a losing rat and a winning rat, but they forced the losing rat to win, pushed it from behind, he would now become a winning rat, and this one would become a losing rat. And what they found is a different part of the brain would start to activate, or one is either it shut down if you lost, or that's what it was. The brain would start to shut down. And they've said they've been able to record this in many, many different animals, including humans. And so that feeling of winning begets more winning. The Cleveland Browns are known as losers. And, you have you've heard of the culture of losing.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I tell my agents and talk about in my Roaring Agents course is that track your small wins. Because what they've also seen in psychology is that if you lose money, you have to win as much, you have 4 times as much money to equal the emotional loss of that. It's like 1,000, you have to win 4,000. So you losing a client, a deal not closing a day before, closing it, whatever, is just going to feel nothing. A closing won't feel as good as a lost closing. So if you have a stack, kind of like journaling, if you've journaled, here's my small wins that you can go back to help give you a foundation of, hey, I'm still good at this. Look at these things I've done, because it's easy for agents to get downtrodden in this because they don't have that supposed big success.
Yep.
So do you feel tracking the small wins is more dopamine, Or is it more serotonin that it's going to set a foundation like I'm hoping it does?
So, the answer is it's all of these, but in specific, in general, when we think about the wins, that's a dopamine response. And dopamine, like we track wins and we set quotas and goals because dopamine works. Like it
Okay.
works, right? It's the reason we pick up the phone a gazillion times a day is because we get a little dopamine hit when we look at the phone or we look at the email. It's like, oh, I'm getting some work done, right? Like we get that dopamine. It's why we go back to Facebook. It's why those red bubbles exist. Like that's all dopamine. That's that little reward. What's interesting is the shift from dopamine to serotonin is the difference between you did good, Mike, good job, good win, and you are good. You do good work. We're good at this. We have skill. You talked about, I know you talk about real estate as a service. It's really as a service rather than a selling a widget. Right. When you think about how you approach real estate as serving people, that's serotonin. That's the difference. And it's why that mindset of service sustains you over time, where the mindset of like, hey, I got to go knock down another deal is not sustaining. Dopamine is really quickly, the half-life of your dopamine hit is like 90 seconds in your blood. The half-life of your serotonin is multiple days. So it's that dopamine, when it crashes, it's like, bleh, as soon as you miss your goal, you feel lousy, right? And so it is the serotonin, the oxytocin that give us this powerful emotional foundation so that then we can use the dopamine as rocket fuel on top. And so for me, I ignored the serotonin, the oxytocin for years. And then, you're growing a company, you do those things and you think you're really cool. And then, like it grows hollow and uninspiring. And then all of a sudden you don't even care about the dopamine, and that's everything goes bad. So for the rats, pushing the stick, the initial thing is dopamine. And when I'm a loser rat, now I'm stressed about all kinds of other things and my cortisol rises. And it's hard to know, in particular in the rats, but if I am I'm not just I didn't just win, but I am good at pushing the stick. I am good. I am skillful. It's an elevated serotonin expression. It's like, they talk about, when you go out and you run and you're trying to build a habit of running, right? You're trying to get in shape. If you reward yourself for the run, that's great. Like, hey, good job, right? You get your thumbs up on your Strava, or, you post it and, you get your reward. That's great. When you now say, I am a runner, now you are in the long term. And I am a runner is a serotonin expression. This is who I am. This is my identity. This is what I'm good at. Versus I am a runner who happened to have a lousy day on the race is very different from like, oh, I won one, now I've lost. I'm a loser, right? So when you're only in the dopamine, you go from win to loss. When you go in the serotonin, you're like, I'm a runner. And so things like, any given hardship rolls off. Like part of being a runner is that I had a slow race. Part of being, I am in the service of clients. I help people find their homes, they set their lives, make these major financial decisions. Like I have a really important service in the world. And okay, that deal fell through. That doesn't change my service in the world, right? And so that's the power of serotonin versus the dopamine. And it's very easy. Like very often we start with the dopamine, we build our sales plan to the dopamine, and it works, right? But the real power is that's what I'm trying to teach, is the real power is the serotonin, the oxytocin. And oxytocin actually may be more powerful, although I use serotonin as a shorthand for it all. But the oxytocin is the love chemical, and oxytocin is like our tolerance, a physical tolerance for pain, is higher because the people who are highest in oxytocin are women giving birth. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're like, who's got like more pain, right? That's what it's for. And so you have this expansive, view of the world. And so the superpower is really having your serotonin, your oxytocin high. It's being focused on your dopamine for the important things, but not for all the things that distract us. And it's getting our cortisol low. Cortisol is like your heart rate. Like you need it to, when you want it to accelerate when you run, but when the rest of the time you want it super low. And so we want our cortisol to be low, except, when we're on stage or right now, like we're kind of performing, right? And so my cortisol's up to focus on this. I'm not being creative with other things. I'm focused on this. And that's what cortisol's for. But we want, when we're done, we want it to go down so that, we're back in our power state. So that's the mix.
So how does meditation help you get to that spot? Because I think I heard you say transcendental meditation, which is usually repeating a word.
So yes, transcendental meditation happens to be the one that works for me. It's a class that I took and it's really useful as opposed to like an app, which was hard for me to follow. But meditation works like this. So like a physical exercise, it is building that habit. And what happens is the amygdala part of the brain is the brain stem, the reptilian part of the brain. And, when we get stress, fear, anger, the amygdala kicks in. It tells the adrenal gland to produce cortisol, among other things, to tighten the muscles, slow the digestion. It's probably going to be a famine, so we better store body fat. Like all of the things that happen. And so what meditate, and so that's the Darwinian version, like when you're running from the lion, that's what the whole process should work. But of course now, what triggers cortisol? Mortgage payments, I've got a angry customer, I got a boss, I got a commute, like all of the news, the phone, like all of these things trigger cortisol. So in our modern world, we have elevated cortisol all the time, like all the time. And you can see that because that's why we're all overweight. And that's why, whatever it is, like 40% of the disease in this country is stress related. And like all of these things, it's all cortisol. And so meditation is a skill to interrupt the modern thinking, which calms the amygdala. And therefore, the adrenal gland can now stop producing the cortisol and produce other things in like testosterone. So it takes in cholesterol and outputs cortisol and adrenaline and testosterone. So especially for men, you get into stress mode, your cortisol is elevated, chronically elevated, your testosterone falls, and like all kind, like start breaking your hip and like all kind of like things like that. So that's what meditation does. And so I happen to do transcendental meditation, lots of meditation. Like you can test them. They've tested them all now, and the science is getting really good on it. Probably the most powerful one in terms of changes to your brain and physiology is the Buddhist loving kindness meditation, where you are giving love to yourself, to the people around you, to the whole world. And the really skilled loving kindness meditators, the Olympic level meditators, like have like unbelievably different brains and like biology going on. It's a really powerful skill. What happens, of course, is you're giving love. The act of giving love, compassion to the world, is an act of oxytocin, serotonin. You get into a relaxed state so that cortisol falls. And now you have these massive skills. You have better health and like all of these benefits that happen. And so, that like, but they all do, even like, Christian prayer, right? If you were to spend 30 minutes praying for the health of the world, you can measure, like, it's a meditative practice, and it is absolutely measurable in exactly what we're talking about here.
You know, as watching a video on Stoicism yesterday, and I'd seen your video, and it was interesting that someone had kind of condensed Stoicism. It says the goal of Stoicism is to be full of love.
That's
And
interesting. That's a
we
great way
would
to look.
not have thought about that about Stoicism, because, you know, so many people just think of the person who has no emotion or anything. And so I thought that was really timely after seeing your video
That's
about
terrific.
that.
Yes. That's a great way to look at it. Yeah, one of the challenges, of course, with Stoicism is we cram that into a modern context, and we want to say that means no emotion. But of course, what we need to capture are the better term is equanimity, and the equanimity is like, I have peace in the face of the crazy conflict. Right. And the crazy conflict, the inevitable conflicts happen. But I have my powerful emotional foundation, my serotonin, my oxytocin, that allows me to say, it's not that I'm a loser because we lost a deal. Like, I provide a great service. I am in this important place in the world, in my community. I love doing it. I genuinely love to watch my clients succeed and be happy in their home. Like, then you lose a deal, and yeah, it sucks, but it doesn't crush you. And so that's the concept of equanimity in the face of that storm.
Where do you think you would have been if you had not come across this?
I was in a place where, you start going, well, this is my life's work, but maybe I don't do it anymore. Maybe I shut it all down. Right. Or I don't know where I would have been, but it was, there are really tough times. And, lots of us, especially this year, some really tough times out there. And my thesis, the whole point of that work is that we can be purposeful with our internal biology and make the magic happen around us. Like, we can literally, we change ourselves. And when we talked about, like, I showed our profit skyrocketed. We didn't change the product. I didn't change my team. I only changed inside myself, and the things happened. Like, I didn't even tell my team what I was doing until a year later. And then they were like, that's what it is. And so but it was really, it was really remarkable.
Was that hard at all to be like, obviously you showed up different, sometimes we're like, oh, I have my story this way. If I show up, people are going to think, it's hard for people to change because of expectations of others. And you didn't tell anyone. It's a little bit easier when you say, hey, this is what I'm going through.
Yeah.
So what was that like to come back in the office and go, hey, because obviously you made some changes, right? I know about your Slack channel and some other things you did. So what were some of those changes, and how hard was that to kind of get the rest of the group involved in?
Well, so, the first thing is my first change is about focusing on my serotonin every day, my serotonin and my oxytocin above my dopamine. Because when I feel serotonin high, I am purposeful in my work, and then picking up the phone call, making the phone call is easier. And then the deal happens, then my dopamine just follows. So my goal was to work on my serotonin. So I did things like, my journaling technique was like, when I felt the negative emotion, I feel the negative emotion, I stop what I'm doing, I write it down, I write the scenario, write the paragraph, and you capture that negative emotion. The negative emotion is, of course, triggering cortisol. And you capture that, you move it out of the amygdala into the frontal cortex, and all of a sudden the signals for the cortisol stop, and so you can capture this. So a negative emotional journal was one of the things that I did to get myself out of the crisis mode. the meditation, the no coming and going principle. So in this no coming and going principle meant that I could, when I need my oxytocin, my serotonin in myself, I can give it to those around me. So I can sit here and go, Mike, you are amazing. Like, I love you. And so you could start saying things like, I love you to your team. And expressing love is the willing of well-being onto another person. It's not like sex or anything, right? You can love total strangers. And when you start doing that, all of a sudden, like your oxytocin rises and the whole day changes. So I would do those things, and I did them diligently for myself. And, magic happens very quickly. And, all the pieces started happening. And you can also do it with food, with your diet. So 95% of our serotonin is produced and stored in our gut, like our small intestine. So you can supplement for it. You can take a supplement called 5-HTP. The T is tryptophan. It's like a common amino acid. And when you take the 5-HTP, take it at night, you wake up the next day, you've produced more serotonin. It helps. There are supplements, adaptogens that help us metabolize the cortisol out of the system. So the cortisol falls lower. And so, doing all of these elements along the way, gratitude journaling. So you're obviously, if you've spent any time trying to work on your business or your life in this world, somebody's told you to work on your gratitude. And gratitude is an expression of serotonin. And so, waking up every day and starting the day with a gratitude journal, and it can be micro, like, man, it's sunny today. I love the California sunshine. Or it might be, macro, like, I am so lucky to live in this universe with these people around me. And, all of these, it can be anywhere in there. And you spend that time with a gratitude journal, and it absolutely is transformative on your day because it lifts your serotonin. Remember, your serotonin lasts in your body for multiple days, right? It's not like dopamine, which is, it's there for a long time.
There was a lesson I got out of a book one time, and it was, there are no ordinary moments. And that idea that when you're standing in a bank line and you just want that 5 minutes to go by, or you're on your commute and you want that 30 minutes to go by, if you stop, and at least for me, when I would do this, I'd stop and go, okay, there are no ordinary moments. What's different? This moment will never play out again this way. Well, I'd tingle. I'd get this feeling because I think you're kind of getting one, but who knows, maybe I was kicking in some serotonin because I was thankful about that moment.
Yep.
And I find that interesting.
And it's great, right? It's a mindset that shifts your day. It keeps you out of the, beating yourself up or it's a powerful thing. And really, that getting in that rut or getting out of that rut is literally a biological chemical change in your body. And so, in that rut, like the rat that is bad at pushing the stick is like, his dopamine is low and probably his serotonin is low, like all of those things are falling. And so the interesting thing is we can do it. You can get out of the thing with a win, or you can get the win because you've adjusted the chemicals. And so we can be purposeful with the chemicals, and the winds follow if the winds aren't coming. Because the winds come and then the chemicals follow, or the chemicals, you influence the chemicals and the winds follow. So you can be purposeful with the chemicals to get ourselves out of that space.
That's fantastic. Well, I think we've gone over time. I really, really appreciate that you spent so much time talking about all this with me. Where can people connect with you?
So altosresearch.com, obviously for the data. You can reach me, Twitter, Mike Simonsen at Twitter, LinkedIn, all the socials are great. All of this stuff we've been talking about, hackinghappiness.io is the website. There's a video up there. You can see my video, and we're working on the book, and sometime we'll get the book out. It's writing a real big book is a big deal, and so it's taken me a long time, but it's a lot of fun. So I love doing calls like this because it motivates me to go start putting stuff in, getting more progress in the book.
Well, let me know when the book's ready. I'll buy it.
Awesome.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Mike, thank you. It was a pleasure.